Beyond the mountains, where the noise of time begins to fade, we follow the traces of a people who have endured. A people not confined by borders, not defined by a flag. They have walked the edges of history, but left their mark on its center. They are the Kurds. But who are the Kurds? The Kurds are an ancient people who have lived for thousands of years in the mountainous regions of Mesopotamia. To understand them, one must go beyond the silence of history books, beyond the stillness of official records. Because the story of the Kurds has often been told not in ink, but in whispers among mountains, in oral traditions, in songs and legends passed down for generations. The origin of the Kurds is still a matter of scholarly debate, but one thing is certain: the name Kurd is not a recent arrival to history. Some trace their roots back to the ancient Medes, a powerful people who, in the 7th century BCE, built an empire in what is now Iran, fought the Assyrians, and formed alliances with the Persians. While it's difficult to draw a direct line between the Medes and the Kurds of today, many Kurdish narratives take pride in this heritage. The Greek historian Xenophon, in his 4th century BCE work Anabasis, spoke of a fierce independent mountain people, the Karduki. Many believe these Karduki were the ancestors of the Kurds, based on where they lived and how they fought. Stubborn, proud, free. Throughout history, the word Kurd appears in many forms, in Arabic sources as Ekrad, in Persian texts as Kurd. These names described a people who lived among the mountains, often nomadic or semi-nomadic, warrior-like, but bound by deep traditions and codes of honor. The Kurds have lived as scattered tribes, sometimes uniting into principalities, occasionally forming short-lived states. But being Kurdish is more than an ethnic identity. It is a civilizational form, a way of remembering, a way of living. In stone houses warmed by stoves, in lullabies sung by mothers, in the laments carried in the voices of the Dengbij, the Kurdish storytellers, this culture has been kept alive. To understand the Kurds is not only to ask who they are, but also how they live, what they love, what they resist, and why they hold on so fiercely to the idea of survival. This is where our story begins, not just with who the Kurds are, but with why they are. To understand the Kurds, it's not enough to ask who they are. We must also ask, where do they live? Because the story of the Kurds is inseparable from the land they call home. Their geography is not just soil or stone. It is memory, identity, and resistance. For centuries, the Kurds have lived across a vast region stretching from the northern edges of Mesopotamia through the Zagros Mountains to the Taurus Ranges and into the Iranian Plateau. This area, known among the people as Kurdistan, has appeared in different forms on different maps. But in the hearts of the Kurds, its meaning has remained unchanged: the historic homeland of a people. Today, that homeland is divided into 4 main parts, split by modern nation-states: Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. But borders drawn by rulers cannot silence shared songs, ancestral ties, or tribal memory. Kurdish culture flows freely across the lines others drew. In Turkey's east and southeast, from Diyarbakir to Van, Hakkari to Mardin, Bitlis to Shirnak, this region has long been home to the Kurds. These lands are not just points on a map. They are named in poems, sung in Stran, mourned in elegies. Here, the Kurds have lived for generations, farming, herding, following the rhythms of nature and tradition. During the Ottoman Empire, many Kurdish leaders cooperated with the state while maintaining internal autonomy. But the founding of the Turkish Republic brought a new vision: one nation, one language. And so began a different era, one of denial. The Kurdish identity was erased from official discourse. Instead of Kurd, they were called Mountain Turks. The Kurdish language was banned. Speaking it, writing it, even teaching it became criminal. Thousands of village names were changed. Mountains and rivers were renamed in an attempt to wipe away memory. The result? A cultural and physical devastation. Resistance soon followed: the Sheikh Said Rebellion of 1925, the Agri Uprising, the Dersim Massacre of 1937-38. These were not just revolts. They were the cries of a people denied the right to be who they are. But each was met with greater violence. In Dersim, thousands were killed, families were torn apart, villages were burned, and a deep silence fell. That silence would last for decades. In the 1960s and 70s, a new Kurdish youth emerged in the cities, questioning their identity. The 1980 military coup in Turkey marked another turning point. Crushing opposition, and unleashing unimaginable brutality. Diyarbakir prison became a symbol of that darkness, its horrors remembered in countless Kurdish households. In 1984, armed conflict erupted. Villages were emptied, millions were forced to migrate westward, many to shantytowns, living on the margins of Turkey's big cities. This migration wasn't just economic, it was a rupture, a break in language, in memory, in community. And yet, every wave of repression was followed by a quiet rebirth. In the 1990s, Kurdish media, literature, and music began to re-emerge. Dangbaj found new audiences. Old stories were told again. Kurdish artists, directors, writers took the stage. By the 2000s, the Kurdish issue had moved to the center of national conversation. Briefly during the so-called peace process, hope returned. Kurdish TV aired, language institutes opened, Kurdish words were spoken in parliament. But the process collapsed, and with its end came a new silence, filled with arrests, closed municipalities, censored newspapers, and renewed. Still, the Kurds remained. Because in their mountains, every rock holds a memory. Every river carries a song. Every stone whispers a name. From children playing in the shadow of Diyarbakir's walls to old Dangbaj sitting by Lake Van, all know this truth. These lands are not just where they were born. They are where they exist. And for the Kurds, geography is not just a place, it is identity itself. A people's identity is not defined by borders alone. What truly defines them lives in their language, in the sorrow carried by their music, in the resistance hidden within their stories. The Kurds, in this sense, are a people who breathe through their culture, because when everything else is silenced, the word remains. And the history of the Kurds has been passed down, not always written, but remembered, spoken, and sung. Kurdish culture has survived the centuries through oral tradition. They may not have had many books, but they had Dangbajs. The Dangbaj, the storyteller, the one who speaks through song, was a living archive. They carried tales of tribal conflicts, forbidden love, uprisings, and loss, sometimes in a single strand, sometimes through hours of uninterrupted song. When the Dangbaj went silent, history itself grew quiet. That is why, in almost every Kurdish home, there was once a Dangbaj cassette, an old lament, or a remembered melody. Kurdish music is music of mourning. Every note carries a brother lost, a father sent into exile, a tear never shed. But it is also the music of defiance. Because the Kurds don't lean into sorrow, they turn sorrow into song. And at the center of all this is language. The Kurdish language is rich and spread across multiple dialects. The most widely spoken is Kurmanji, used throughout Turkey, Syria, northern Iraq, and much of the Kurdish diaspora. Kurmanji has a strength in its sound, solid and deep, but within it, soft emotions reside. Sorani, spoken mainly in Iraq and Iran, differs grammatically but shares the same cultural roots. Zazaki, also known as Demilki and Gorani, bring their own poetic flavor, their own unique stories. And yet, despite all this richness, Kurdish shares a common fate. It has been banned, silenced, marginalized. Many Kurds grow up without ever learning to read or write in their mother tongue. In schools, they are taught in another language. But still, Kurdish lives on. In homes, in marketplaces, in lullabies and hale dances, the language survives. Because Kurdish is not just a way to communicate, it's a way to belong. It is existence itself. The Kurdish way of life is woven with this cultural richness. In mountain villages, life follows traditional rhythms: farming, herding, gathering for meals. Women rise early to bake bread in clay ovens. Men take the flocks to the hills. But come evening, the family gathers at one table. No one eats before washing their hands. No one begins without a blessing. These small rituals speak volumes about what is sacred, about what binds a people together. Kurdish weddings carry both joy and sorrow. Even celebration is cautious. The hale is not just a dance, it is a formation of unity, of moving as one, of feeling together. And then comes Newroz. For the Kurds, Newroz is more than a spring festival. It is a symbol of rebirth, a flame of resistance, a declaration of existence. To gather around the fire, dressed in colorful clothes, dancing, holding torches, is to say we're still here. Kurdish women too carry this culture. They are the ones who hold the home together, teach the language, pass on the songs. But they are not confined to tradition. Kurdish women have stood on the front lines, as poets, as leaders, as freedom fighters. Their strength is woven into every fabric of Kurdish life. And finally, there is one more truth about Kurdish culture. It is shaped by exile. So many Kurdish families have been uprooted from their villages, forced into cities or foreign lands. But those migrations did not erase them. They packed their memories into suitcases. And wherever they went, they took their songs, their recipes, their rituals, their grief, and their hope. Kurdish culture is a legacy that was meant to be forgotten, but never was. It is a path from silence to story, from prohibition to poetry, from erasure to endurance. And walking that path isn't just about remembering the past, it's about understanding the future. The silence of history is often filled by the voices of the powerful, but somewhere in that silence, a people have carried their voice. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes in mourning, and sometimes in cries that shook the sky. The Kurds' story is one of such a journey. Each time they tried to write their name into history, it was erased. Each time they were silenced, they began speaking again, from another place, in another form. In ancient times, the word Kurd may not have been used, but their presence was known, under names like the Medes, Gutians, Subartians, and Karduki. Many scholars consider these groups to be the ancestors of the Kurds. In Anabasis, the Greek historian Xenophon describes a fierce mountain people, the Karduchi, who lived in the same rugged regions where Kurds live today. From those highlands, the Kurds watched history unfold, always nearby, but rarely at the center. In the 7th century, with the spread of Islam, the Kurds were among the first to adopt the new faith. They served under the Abbasids and Seljuks. Some even rose to greatness. None more than Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, known in the West as Saladin. In the 12th century, he retook Jerusalem from the Crusaders and became a legendary figure, not only in the Muslim world, but also respected across Europe. He was the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty, and he was Kurdish. To this day, his name is spoken with pride across Kurdish generations, a symbol of dignity, wisdom, and resistance. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Kurds formed their own principalities: Bitlis, Botan, Hakkari, Soran, Batinan. These regions often served as buffers between great empires like the Ottomans and Safavids. In the 16th century, the Ottomans, led by Idrisi Bitlisi, forged an alliance with Kurdish leaders. In return, Kurdish beys were granted autonomy. This allowed the Kurds to maintain their own customs, leadership, and lands for a time. But the 19th century brought change. The Ottoman Empire, now reforming, centralized its power. The old Kurdish principalities were dismantled. One such moment came in 1847, when Bedirhan Bey rebelled, an uprising that marked the collapse of one of the last great Kurdish emirates. Then came the 20th century. The Ottoman Empire fell. New nation-states were born. And once again, the Kurds found themselves at a crossroads. Some Kurdish intellectuals tried to claim rights within the new Turkish state. But what followed instead was denial, repression, and force. In 1925, the Sheikh Said rebellion erupted. It was more than a religious uprising. It was a response to the erasure of Kurdish identity. Then came the Agri Rebellion, 1927-30, and the Dersim Massacre, 1937-38. These were not just military campaigns, they were traumas. Thousands killed, families displaced, villages destroyed, and memories burned. These events carved deep scars into the Kurdish collective memory. In 1946, in the Iranian city of Mahabad, the Kurds declared a republic. The Republic of Mahabad was born, a rare political experiment in Kurdish self-rule, but it lasted just 11 months. Its leader, Qazi Muhammad, was executed. The dream was shattered, and yet, Mahabad lives on in Kurdish memory, not just as a loss, but as proof that unity is possible. In the 1980s, a new and painful chapter began in Turkey. Armed conflict broke out between Kurdish guerrilla movements and the state. Entire villages were emptied, thousands were displaced, countless lives were lost. At the same time, Kurdish identity was rising, in the streets, in the universities, in the arts. By the early 2000s, Kurds were no longer invisible. They were present and they were speaking. But still, the struggle continues, for equality, for education in their language, for cultural rights. The history of the Kurds is not just one of victimhood, nor only of heroism. It is a tapestry woven from grief and resilience, silence and speech, loss and survival. And perhaps the most important truth is this: the Kurds are a people who have been told to disappear, and yet they have always found a way to return. Today, The voice of the Kurds is no longer heard only in the mountains. It echoes in university lecture halls, on the screens of film festivals, in the pages of novels, and across every platform of social media. Once denied the right to exist, the Kurdish people now strive to tell their own stories, in their own words, in their own language. But this visibility was not easily won. It is built upon a century of silence, of erased memories, of identities forced underground. Every word, every song, every book carries the weight of resistance. The Kurds continue to live across 4 main regions: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. But now, beyond those 4 parts, a powerful diaspora has emerged. From Germany to Sweden, Canada to Australia, millions of Kurds have turned exile into endurance, creating new spaces of culture, building institutions, opening language schools, and establishing their own media networks. In Iraqi Kurdistan, a different scene has taken shape. After 2005, a regional government was formally recognized, with its own parliament, flag, official language, and armed forces, the Peshmerga. Despite internal political struggles, this semi-autonomous structure stands as a landmark moment in Kurdish history, an example of self-governance in practice. Meanwhile, in Rojava, northern Syria, a new model has emerged, perhaps the most unique expression of Kurdish political thought in recent times. Built during the Syrian civil war, this self-administration project, led largely by women, is grounded in grassroots democracy, gender equality, and multi-ethnic coexistence. Rojava became a message to the world. Kurds don't just fight for space, they imagine new ways to live. In Turkey, the picture is more complex. In the early 2010s, the peace process brought hope. Kurdish-language TV channels aired. Political campaigns used Kurdish freely. Cultural centers opened. Even a few words were spoken in parliament. But the process ended. And with its collapse came a return to silence. Arrests shut down municipalities, censored newspapers, renewed conflict. And yet, one thing could never be silenced: art. Kurdish cinema continues to rise, from Yilmaz Güney to Şavkat Amin Korki to Bahman Gobadi. Their films carry both sorrow and resilience. Kurdish literature, too, has flourished. Whether in Kurdish or other languages, voices like Mehmet Uzun, Murathan Mungan, and Beycan Matur speak with the same soul. Kurdish youth today are not just remembering the past, they are creating the future. They write code, they direct films, they produce podcasts, they carry multiple identities, citizens of the world, and descendants of a people whose name was once forbidden. But questions remain. Will there be Kurdish schools? Will there be a university in the mother tongue? Can real peace ever be achieved? These are not only Kurdish questions, they are questions for everyone who lives in this land. Because the story of the Kurds is not just their own, it is a shared history, one that belongs to all the peoples of this region. And that story is still being written. With every song, every book, every name given to a child, the Kurds are still here, still resisting, still speaking. This podcast may end here, but the story of the Kurds does not. Because history is not always written in archives, but in what is told, what is remembered, and what refuses to be forgotten. And this people have not forgotten.